Welcome to the episode of Locked In. In this video, I'm going to be going over the Poseidon Triton road bike. We're going to be covering specs, ride quality, price, and my final thoughts. So let's get into this review. First off, the specs of the bike. Now this bike is spec'd with a 6061 aluminum frame, a carbon fiber fork, an 8-speed Claris Shimano drivetrain, as well as a mixture of their own spec'd parts or other name brands that honestly I haven't heard of before, and the wheels are wrapped in Kenda tires. And the bike in a 54 centimeter weighs a rated 22 pounds. Now let's get on to ride quality. As many of you know, carbon fiber is always the material that everyone wants in their road bike, but most are going to start out with aluminum or possibly steel depending on your preference. Now, in days of old, aluminum rode really harsh, and that was what everybody really thought. And over the last 5 to 6 years, aluminum has come a very long way, one in weight and mainly in ride quality. I've ridden some aluminum frames that are surprisingly comfortable, and that is really something that you're looking for if you need to save the money in an aluminum frame bike. Now, for this bike specifically, ride quality is a mixed bag, I would say, to be honest. I've ridden everything under the sun: steel, my current bike obviously, aluminum, carbon, and a variety of carbon bikes and aluminum bikes. I've probably owned 50 to 75 bikes at this point. I've totally lost count. And this bike rides surprisingly stiff for the price point, I would say, but it rides kind of numb. What I mean by that is it definitely handles the power well as far as the frame set goes, and it definitely takes your inputs and makes you move forward. It definitely rides a little flat in the sense of when you hit a bump, it feels like the whole frame kind of moves together. There's no real compliance anywhere in the frame that's more fluid, where in some other frames that I've ridden that usually have thinner seat stays or a just different tube shape to it in the rear, it tends to dampen the vibration more just in the rear of the bike and not something that transmits to the whole bike. So keep that in mind with this review. I'm not bashing the frame, I'm just letting you know where it is as far as overall ride quality compared to other aluminum bikes. Now, I deem the stiffness of this bike down to the down tube, the bottom bracket, and the chain stays. If you look at them right now, they're massive. They are really thick. And that's going to basically make the bike very stiff. Hence the ride quality, and I feel that the seat stays are a little too thick along with the very thick chain stays. I feel that they could thin out the chain stays slightly or maybe taper them near the rear and really thin out the seat stays, because those things are so solid at the bottom, you can allow those top sections to flex a little bit more to really improve the ride quality going forward. As far as a carbon fiber fork, for the price point being a carbon bladed fork with an aluminum steer tube, it rode like most. I wouldn't have any pros or cons to it from other similarly spec bikes that I've ridden. Stiff enough, comfortable enough. I had no gripes with it. Now, as far as the rest of the spec of the bike, I was actually really happy with the handlebar shape. Getting onto the seat that was spec'd on it, that is definitely a personal preference, and I like to call this seat the Poseidon because, as you can guess from the name I gave it, what it kind of looks like. And I've never liked physique saddles. Nothing's ever fit me from all the ones that I've tried, so I'm leaving that on the table for what your preference is. Now let's get on to the drivetrain. Obviously, the drivetrain and the ride quality and everything, it's something you're interacting with, so I deem this as something that is something interactive and contributes to the ride. So, as far as the Claris group set, it is the older generation of Claris group set. You can initially tell that by the shift cables sticking out of the hoods. Again, price point for this bike makes sense why it's not the new Claris. That's a lot cleaner looking, integrated cabling. That being said, it shifts okay. It totally functions. It is something that you have to be a little more on top of as far as adjustment goes, but for somebody who's getting into road biking and understanding the drivetrain, it's a lot better than what I've seen similarly price point bikes at with the older Sora style shifters that have that wannabe campy thumb lever in it. So this is a step up from that, but just keep in mind, again, price point. Now let's get on to the gearing of the bike. That was something I found very strange. Typically a bike like this is spec'd with a compact front crankset, an 1128 or an 1132 rear cassette. With the heavier bike or the newer experienced rider, typically they want a lighter gear ratio for climbing if they are going to be doing that. Now this bike was spec'd with an 1132 cassette in the rear, which is great, and in the front it was a 5039, which is strange. You never see that gear combo. I found out that it's because they spec it with a standard length crankset, so it's a 130 BCD crankset, so you can only put a 39 I have seen 38s out there on the inner ring, and you can do a 50 to a 53 on the big ring. So that is one real gripe that I think they should have spec'd a 110 crankset for it so they can run a 50-34 and have a way bigger gear range on it for the entry-level road rider. As far as the tires and the wheels go, for the price point, again, they ride about the same. They feel a little heavy initially. If you've ridden anything lighter than that, you initially feel that. But they roll okay, they are tubed, and they brake fine. But overall, for the money that you're going to spend on this bike, which I'll get into next, I think it's a great entry-level bike for someone who's really budget-oriented. So now let's get into price point. All of those things said, this bike retails currently on Poseidon's website for $499. Now, for the money, that's a lot of bike for the money. Now, are there nicer options out there? Yes, but they cost more. So it really depends on what the value for you is. If you want a bike that's a little more lively, a little more compliant and well-rounded, it's gonna cost you more money to get. For something that's someone who's never ridden a road bike and hasn't had this depth of riding different things like I have, you might not notice anything that I've said. And that's something that's individual to you. So that's something that you need to determine. If this is something that is really something you want to do, you really want to get into road biking, you only have this much money, and this is not a bad option. If you've ridden a few bikes before and you potentially can have a little bit more budget, I think there are potentially better options for you purely on ride quality. But again, if you don't have that baseline, I don't think you would notice. Just know that there are some things to look out for and to compare to that you need to look at directly when you're comparing this bike to other options in gearing or material or ride quality or price point or shifting or what generation of parts are on it. So always keep everything in mind, and that's what I try to bring you from Locked In as a overview on whenever I do a bike review, and I want to give you guys an honest opinion because that's what I'm here to do. So thanks for watching this episode of Locked In. Please make sure to turn notifications on so you see all my content that I upload. Subscribe to this channel, and you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. All my links in the description below. So thanks for watching this episode of Locked In.
Let's get